also we built a product in which the perspective is everyone should participate in the process of designing. And so you'll often see that, an engineer coming into a file and saying, oh, actually, I have a different idea, and, copying it and like riffing. And that's, expected behavior, and that's celebrated. So we see some of that happening. And then, we kind of codify intercultural values.
仕事のモードに切り替える瞬間とか、なんかルーティンとかありますか？
巨人戦の
巨人戦の
ハイライトを、見ながら、
すごい、これすごくないですか？これ結構。
巨人ファン。
Hello, everybody. I'm Tsuro, and we are here today at the Figma Japan offices. Yuki, thanks for hosting us, and thanks for coming to Japan.
Thank you for taking the time with us.
What's kind of the purpose of the visit this time around?
Well, two things. One, typically I come to Japan at least once a year because this is an important office for us, and I really like coming out here to meet our customers and our community. And then secondly, we just had our big user conference Config, where we launched a bunch of new products. So it's a great opportunity to talk to our community about it, get their feedback, and hear what they think.
So Mickey and I, we both went to Config this year, first time there.
Thank you for making the trip.
It was an incredible event. You could really see the culture of Figma kind of really shine through with the users, with all the employees there as well. How many times have you hosted Figma now, Config now?
Yeah, I think that would have been our 6th time.
Okay,
I wanna say.
wow.
Yeah.
And then the team flew out to Europe afterwards as well, and you guys hosted there.
Right.
Amazing. So I think one of the biggest things at Config this year in my mind was, Figma originally launched 2016. I want to say, with one product.
Right.
And you guys stayed one product for about 5 years.
Right.
And in 2021, you launched FigJam.
Right.
2023, I think it was Dev Mode, and then 2024 Figma Slides.
Right.
All of a sudden this year, you decide to double your product lineup. So I want to ask, what was the decision-making process of actually deciding to launch 4 products all at once? Let's start there.
Well, at Figma, I don't think it was necessarily a conversation like, let's double our product lineup. It's always, how do we help people go from idea to final product and make that process as fast as possible? In some cases, we build new products. In some cases, we build new features into existing products. I think we've been lucky over the years to really be investing in our platform. So as we build new products, we've learned how to do it. And we've also done it in a way where it's easier to launch new products. So that kind of explains why, it took us a while to build a second product in FigJam, but thereafter we've been able to kind of pile on, so to speak, just because we have the foundations of doing so. And really at the end of the day, like, our launches were just about, recognizing some of the challenges in today's process of going from an idea to a final product. Things get lost in translation. You might have a great design, that you've created, but then how do you actually make sure that it gets translated into a product that users can use? And that's why, Figma Sites was giving people complete control over exactly how, things look and feel and behave in users' hands. Or, Figma Make was all about, how do you actually help people explore a bunch of different ideas very quickly and validate it? And so, that theme of going from idea to product is what really grounded a lot of these releases.
Yeah, I was and especially a big fan of Figma Make. And the presenter, Holly, she did an incredible job. I knew Holly from before, so I was really surprised to see her come up on stage and make the announcement.
Okay.
So, launching multiple products at once, though, is a pretty big burden on your team. How organizationally, how did you kind of manage that? Did you have different teams work on different products? Like how did that kind of come about?
Yeah, I mean, the way we organize typically is around different kinds of user types. So we have a group of people focused on designers and design tools, a group of people focused on developers, and these collaborators and marketers. So I think staying focused on the user is ultimately what's important, so that we're not necessarily incentivizing. While we doubled our product lineup, the incentive at Figma shouldn't be let's build more products. It's about how do we serve these different users better. So that's how we organize today.
Got it. And then in terms of like building product at Figma, is there like a regular cadence of product reviews? Like how did like I think for example like a company like Duolingo, for example, has something I think once every 2 weeks or so, and they have a specific group of people there as decision makers.
Yeah.
What's kind of the process for Figma?
Yeah. It's a little bit of a mix of, bottoms up and top down, right? Like, for example, when I think about, many of our new products, like, last year was Figma Slides. This year, things like Figma Make or Figma Buzz. There's a little bit of like people getting passionate about a particular product or user type, and just making a pitch up for it. Or we have this great tradition called Maker Week, which is like our hack week, where people kind of get to take off their regular team hats and pursue a project that they're passionate about. And so we often see a lot of those kind of bottoms up ideas emerge and get fleshed out during those periods, and people kind of making a pitch. So that kind of like happens, or people look at the data that we have and say, hey, actually we realize that people are using Figma in this unexpected way, or they're hacking our product in this kind of way, and that shows this demand,
Right.
And that's usually kind of this inspiration for getting a project going. And then once like those things get reviewed and improved, yes, definitely we have a cadence of checking in. And Figma Make was a really great example of we were checking in every week because it's so fast moving, right? But there are others for which we have different ways of formatting. So it's I don't think we have this one way, but very much like the beginning process is rooted in people exploring and people looking at what our community is doing.
I think one of the really interesting things when Mickey and I went to go visit your offices in San Francisco was, I think, the person who's giving us a tour mentioned that there's a room filled with like art projects and like crayons and all these different things where I think Figma team members come in and they do different things creatively. And the culture you've built there, I think, is especially prone to being able to kind of imagine different types of things. What was kind of the setup there? Like why did you kind of build, like how did you build that kind of culture?
Yeah. Well, I think two things. One is naturally we attracted a bunch of people who were makers. In fact, in the early days when people were joining Figma, the first question we asked new employees as they kind of came up on stage to introduce themselves is like, how do you, in what ways are you a maker, right? And people talk about, making, maybe it's cooking, maybe it's, like sewing, and maybe it's something else, right? I personally design, uniforms for my softball team, so I think that kind of was very much a part of our culture. Also, we built a product in which the perspective is everyone should participate in the process of designing. And so you'll often see that, an engineer coming into a file and saying, oh, actually, I have a different idea, and, copying it and like riffing. And that's, expected behavior, and that's celebrated. So we see some of that happening. And then, we kind of codify it in our cultural values. So, for example, we have one around love your craft, and this intense love for just like building really well-crafted things or becoming better at your craft. Or we have another one which is play, which I think is one that kind of that room encapsulates of letting people have that creative outlet, and through play discovering how to make a product more delightful for our users. So those are some ways that we're designing our culture.
You mentioned kind of craft and craftsmanship. I think Figma has a very, very focused kind of strategy around kind of craftsmanship and kind of building that culture. One of the things I want to ask specifically kind of during product building is, craftspeople have this very intuitive sense of what users might want, or what they think users want. And oftentimes in startup land, you have these kind of mixed messages that you get from users. Sometimes data points are are not correct. They're this difference between like revealed preferences versus stated preferences, right? How do you as a product manager, as a product builder, kind of balance the two and figure out what the users actually want?
Yeah. Well, I think at the end of the day, what's important is immersion in what customers are saying and doing, right? And through seeing a wide spectrum of things, you start to build a better intuition. So, for example, if you're only looking at support tickets, you might get people who are particularly dissatisfied, and that's really important for us to go and fix, right? But we also want to see people who are, Dylan, our founder, often talked about, well, how do we help create more super users, right? And so go find them, and what are they doing, and like how do we make more people like them? And so it's really important to kind of intentionally go out and find a wide range of people. So that's kind of like the first thing I would say. And then I think the second thing is curiosity is really important. And we often talk about how our engineering team often kind of, when something goes wrong, we employ the method of 5 whys, right? Which is like, okay, why did that happen? Well, why did that happen? And you kind of get to the root cause. And I think it's important to employ that with user feedback as well. So when people say, I want this feature, instead of just building it, right, say, well, why do you want this feature? Okay, you have this problem. Well, why do you even have that problem in the first place? And you might get to the truth of what you really need to build. Yeah.
I think, the idea of truth it feels like such a common denominator between all the successful startups and all the successful leaders is that they really try to get to ground truth, whether if that's within the company and employees or if it's users as well. How do you manage to do that at Figma? Do you just go and reach out to the customers and look at support tickets? Yeah.
Well, I think one of our other cultural values is building community. And to build community, it really means being intentional about creating spaces and to bring people together, but also build trust. And I think that what we've been lucky to be able to do is build relationships where we can ask people in our community what they think, and they'll be honest with us. And I think that can be hard sometimes, because people want to be polite or, they're not as direct. And so for us to be able to say, hey, we have this idea, what do you think? And some people may be like, that's a terrible idea, and let me tell you why. Like that kind of, intimate relationship with our customers is a really important part of being able to get to the truth.
Right.
Where people can kind of like, keep you honest in a sense. Yeah.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
You mentioned before about looking at ways in which users hack your products, and I think PayPal they saw this a long time ago with the eBay thing, and that's how they really got started. What's an example of like a user hack that your team saw and thought like maybe this will turn into a product or feature?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, the first one was what inspired FigJam, where it was at the height of the pandemic. Everyone was working from home. It was a time when people were doing things like Zoom happy hours, right? But that was getting old.
I remember those days.
And we noticed that people were just hanging out in Figma, and it was something about seeing each other's cursors and playing little games and meetings and so we're realizing, Figma can be for meetings and fun, and that inspired us to think about FigJam as a category, how to make that more accessible. Or another good example is Figma Slides, where before Figma Slides existed, people had made millions of decks using Figma design. And so that was already kind of like this early signal of, there will be product market fit here. And we have an opportunity to make it more accessible to everyone.
Got it.
Yeah.
Turning back the conversation to a little bit more on the organizational side, I think a lot of companies, startups and kind of bigger startups and bigger enterprises are struggling right now in terms of how do you implement AI into your teams, have people utilize tools. And it's a lot easier for startups because they can start from scratch. They don't have to worry about any existing workflows.
Right.
How does Figma kind of navigate through it, and then how do you kind of get your team more and more quote unquote AI native?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the first thing is, I think there are two things that are really important. The first is to really ground yourself in the problem. Like it's really easy for us to think of AI as a solution looking for a problem, right? And in fact, even in our own research, we found that in the early days of AI, a lot of our designers are building AI features that they said they were not proud of, right? Because it was just this mandate to add AI, right? But at the end of the day, it's like AI is this powerful thing that can solve your problems in a way you weren't able to before, but that grounding in like the user problem is really important. So that's kind of like the first thing in terms of product development. I think the second thing is, that kind of idea of play and curiosity is really important. Recently Dylan was kind of like, hey, we shouldn't be planning like doing annual planning. It needs to be like we need to be looking at all the things that are coming in every single day, every single week, and making sure that we're playing with it, have a culture of prototyping and and seeing what's out there. New models, new capabilities, right? And so I think that mentality is really important right now because it's such a dynamic world. Yeah.
Got it. Can you expand a little bit on what you mentioned, kind of what Dylan said about kind of roadmap building and how does the leadership team think about it right now, especially in this kind of AI era?
Well, I think the most important thing is, like there are going to be these technological advances that happen in the industry. And if you are too fixed on your roadmap, you'll kind of be in a situation where you're trying to make it work for what's existing, but it doesn't quite work. And I think it's important for, a group of people to always be trying these out, playing with new ideas, and getting an intuition around what's possible, what's not, right? And I think it's especially important because, there's a lot of hype as well. And so being able to play with it yourself to build a better mental model of what's actually possible versus like what's a great demo is also important. So creating the space in your roadmap and your process to be able to do that, and be able to discuss like all these new capabilities is important.
Right.
And that requires a certain level of flexibility, which, in a traditional world, it might have been considered like thrash, right? Like, distraction. But actually, like the positive framing of it is like nimbleness, right? And flexibility. So that's something that Dylan has asked us to embrace more.
Interesting. Does that mean, for example, when you kind of roadmap kind of the company and products, you're not looking for like a very specific destination, you're almost like setting the direction, and before maybe you're like 10% off in either way, and that was okay, maybe now you're like 30% off on each way and you're okay? Like how are you supposed to think
I
about
think
this?
that the most important thing is grounding in what problem you're trying to solve in the first place, and it just so happens that there might be better ways to solve that as technology advances. So I think that's my mental model.
Got it. And then kind of beyond kind of having more people comfortable with AI within your kind of employee base, obviously all these different workflows will start changing. We'll have a huge new, influx of digital labor coming into our workplaces. What are some areas where we have to kind of rethink organizationally? Like maybe it's like a evaluation, maybe it's something different. But what are some areas that you think we have to kind of rethink?
Well, I was recently talking to one of my mentors, Shishir Mehrotra, who's the CEO of Grammarly, and he was talking about kind of how in the world of agents and people relying on AI to do a lot of work, the most important thing is for individual contributors to learn how to be great managers. Because all of a sudden, like what you have to be doing is reviewing all the work that gets created and discerning what's good versus not, and creating really great instruction. So I think that's kind of an interesting change that we'll end up seeing. In our world, in kind of the world of product development design, I think what's really going to be important is, people are going to be liberated to spend more time thinking about kind of the user experience, the actual user problems, and be creative there. And maybe some of the things that people were spending a lot of time in, like making mocks look more realistic or, things like that, like will benefit from more automation.
Right.
But that just means people kind of like, we call it moving up the stack a little bit, but like, and they can explore more ideas or, really push on the quality of the experience. And so I think there's going to be a greater focus on design itself because that's the only thing that can differentiate you
Right.
in a world where it's so easy to pump out software.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
So last two questions. The first one being, you mentioned kind of mentorship.
Yeah.
How did you kind of form? Do you have multiple mentors? Like, how did you form kind of how did you form those relationships?
Yeah.
What was I think a lot of entrepreneurs are missing out on being able to find good mentors.
Yeah.
What's kind of your advice there?
Well, for me, it's kind of like I've been lucky to work at these companies where there are a lot of amazing people who work there. And so, a lot of the mentors I have are people who, were part of those companies who I looked up to or, who was part of my management chain at some point. And so, that's kind of where I came from, where, I worked at bigger companies first before kind
Right.
of going to these smaller companies. I think the other thing is like really focusing on community and for us, like we try to do that ourselves where we say, hey, like let's make a community for designers where designers can also find mentorship,
Right.
right? There aren't a lot of companies right now or organizations that are spending a lot of time creating those communities. And so we're trying to be intentional about creating that so that people can find, find mentors, or at least learn what other people are doing.
Yeah, I mean, it feels like in this age, the community building is going to be even more important, and the human aspect of it is going to
Absolutely.
be far more of a value differentiator than just the product itself.
Absolutely.
So last question for me before I kind of hand it off. So one of Figma's goals is to help users from idea to product, and you guys really hammered it home in Figma config. That was a very impressive thing where everybody said the same thing,
Oh, good.
and it kind of really kind of hit home. And I think on Dylan on your CEO's X profile, he writes eliminate the gap between imagination and reality, which is such a great way of framing it.
Yeah.
And obviously Figma has done a lot of things to help out in the space. 5 to 10 years from now, just kind of imagining the future, where do you think, what kind of products would you want to see, regardless of whether if it's Figma or not, that helps accelerate this mission?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think the reality is, today when you have an idea in your head, translating it into something on paper, something that ends up being real, is in fact a very arduous process. And some of it is because you don't have you have a very blurry sense of an idea, and maybe you need help fleshing it out, right? And part of it is maybe because there are so many things that happen between and so many people who touch the process to the point where, somewhere along the way, something got lost in translation, right? And the essence of what was good is gone because, there is some trade-off that someone made and, like you don't even recognize that thing anymore. And so kind of like, how do we, I don't know what all the products can be that like help you do this, but people dream really amazing ideas every single day. And yet most of those don't become reality.
Right.
And my hope is that anyone who has a half decent idea has the ability to not only like express it, but get the help to make it better. And so, products like Figma Make is a small step in that direction. But we think there are going to be many, many more products and capabilities that help people do this and to really make, the dreamers like, and help them kind of, in Dylan's words, like take their imagination, make it reality.
Amazing.
Yeah.
Yuki, well, thank you for your time today, and hopefully we'll see you again next year.
Yeah. Thank you for the great questions.
Amazing.
よろしくお願いします。
よろしくお願いします。
これさっきいただいたんですけど、
あ、
可愛いですね。
ありがとうございます。はい。
すごい。日本語のインタビューは結構多いですか？
いや、あまり多くないんで、はい。
あ、
よろしくお願
ありが
いします。
とうございます。よろしくお願いします。ちょっとこれは一旦じゃあ置いて、いやもっとこうかな。どうですか？可愛いかなと思って。
はい。
そうですね。結構日本には来られますか？
そうですね。まあ、毎年来てます。はい。
結構私たちもコンフィグのサンフランシスコ行かせていただいて、その後ロンドンで東京って結構お忙しいと思うんですけど、 いつ休まれてますか？
いや、まあ今回もまあ実は一応実家東京なんで、
あー
はい、まあ両親とちょっと時間を過ごしてっていう、はい。
なるほどです。最近のそのスーパーファンというかユーザーラブみたいなものってありますか？ハマってるものとか音楽とか。
個人的にですか？まあハマってるものっていうか、やっぱ、まあ、サンフランシスコですとやっぱウェイモってご存知ですか？自動
ウェイモ
ウェイモ
はい。
それハマってるっていうかよく使ってます。
なんでですか？
いやもうなんか魔法のような
あー
製品なんで、はい、
使い心地がいいってところで
使い
すか？
心地もいいですし、まあ、プ
UI
ロダクトとしても、はい、よく考えてるなっていう、はい、
なるほど。それはアプリの UI とかも
アプ
含め
リもそうですし、まあ、社内の体験もそうです。はいはい、
結構さっきお忙しいっていうお話もあったと思うんですけど、
はいはい、
どういう一日を過ごされてますか？
そうですね。まあ毎日ちょっと違うんですけど、
そうですよね。
はい。まあでも結構まあ、9時から5時の時間を考えると 8割ぐらいは
はい。
Figma のファイルの中にいますみたいな。っていうのはまあ、例えばレビューであったり、
はい、
あるいはワンワンワンでも、
はい。
一緒にブレインストームしたりとかなのでなんかよく製品を使ってます。
なるほど。
はい、
じゃあ常にオンラインで結構
そうですね。はい。
その忙しい中でどうやって一日をリセットされてますか？
週末とかは
はい。
野球とかソフトボールやってます。
プレイし
はい
て、
はいはい。
さっき
はい、
のユニフォーム作ったって
あ、
話。
そうですそうです。はい。
それもポジションは？
ポジション、今はレフトです。外野です。
お
はい
お、
はい、
それはすごいんですか？
まあどうなんでしょうかね。
それ結構前からプレイされてるんですか？
そうですね。まあまあ、幼少期から野球はやってました。はい。
それは東京にいらっしゃった
東京にいた
時も？
時もそうですし、まあフィリピンとか高校の時もやってましたね。
なるほど。ちなみにじゃあ仕事のモードに切り替わったなみたいな瞬間とか、なんかルーティンとかありますか？
そうですね。まあ朝コーヒー飲んで。
何時に起きますか？
まあ6時40分とかです。
細かいですね。
細かいですか。まあなんか6時半ってなんか感覚早いんで、7時だと遅いっていう感じで、まあちょっと
それタイマーなし
不思議
で、
はい、
タイマーなしで起きれるんですか？
いやタイマーはもちろん使ってます。
6時40分にして、早起きですよね。
そうですかね。
早起きだと。それでコーヒー飲んで、
はい、
オフィスに
そうです。はいはい、
基本的には毎日オフィスにいらっしゃる？
そうですね。まあ週4日ぐらいは行ってます。はい、一応通勤っていうか電車に乗ってでそれによって、
電車で行ってるんですか？
はいはい、リズムに仕事のリズムに
何聞いてるんですか？音楽は。
いや最近はですね、最近っていうか今野球シーズンなので、なんかハイライト巨人戦のハイライトを、はい、見ながら、はい。
すごい、これすごくないですか？これ結構。
巨人ファン。
どの選手が好きなんですか？
そうですね。まあ最近は、まあ前は今監督されてる安倍監督、安倍晋之助が一番好きな選手です。
すごい。私が大丈夫ですか？
僕は別にその大学知ってるわけじゃない。コーヒーのブランド。
確かにおすすめのカフェとかブランドとかありますか？
ブランド、いやまあアメリカですとなんかブルーボトルとか言ってます。
美味しいですね。確かに東京にもあっておすすめですね。確かに。そのフィグマのジャケットというかスウェット着られてますけど、好きなフィグマスワークはありますか？
フィグマスワーク。ですね。
それは売ってますか？
これはピンです。ピンです。
ピンなんですね。なるほど。
はい。そうですね。この帽子とかも結構可愛いと思います。
ちょっと確かに可愛いですよね。結構新しいやつですよね。今回のコンフィグで出てた。確かにそれは結構なんかフィグマのグッズ拝見して結構色味とか素材が可愛くて、なんか普通のなんていうか企業グッズとかのレベルではない ファッショナブルですごく
あ
私も愛用してます。
ありがとうございます。
すいません。好きな本とかありますか？
好きな本ですか？
最近読んでる本とか
最近
でもいいです。漫画でもいいです。
漫画でもいいです。
何でもいいです。
ですね、大学時代はよく中国の
はい。
なんか例えば日本語でなんて言うんですかね、石の頭の生地の木って石頭木っていうのかなっていう
知らなかったです。
それを最近ではないんですけど
はい
読んだり、あるいは三体問題とか
ああ、
知ってます
はい。
ね。
ドラマにもなってた。
はいはいはい
ああ、
はい。
読んでるんです
はいはい
ね。
はいはい。
ドラマも見ましたか？
読みました。はい。
どうでした？
面白かったです。はい。
おーサイファイお好きなんですね。
サイファイも好きですね。
なるほど。歴史とか、
はいはい
そういう
はい。
なんか個人的に聞きたいなと思ったのは、
はい。
好きなメモ帳とかペンとかってありますか？どういう
もちろん。
デスクの
ああ、
ウェア系の話を聞
そうで
きたいな。
すね。
アプリとか。
ペンはどっちかっていうと日本に来るたびに結
はい。
構買ってます、やっぱ。はい。
え
なんかロフトに行って
ー、
買いに行ったり
え
とかしてます。
ー、楽しそう。
はいはいはいはい。なんか、はい。
無地とかも行ったり
無地も、
しますか？
はい。はい。
ロフト、どういうペンが好きなんですか？
なんか極細な
ああ、0.3
みたいな。
みたいな、
はいはいはい。
0.5とか。確かに、なんか漢字書くから細いやつが多いですよね、
そうですね。
日本だと。確かに確かに。じゃあ結構メモするときはデジタルとかも多いですか？
そうですね。まあどっちかっていうと、なんかフィグジャムで
ああ、確か
どんどん
に確か
変えていくっていう感じ
に。
ですね。
それは個人的なその自分だけのメモもフィグジャムに書いたりとかしますか？
そうですね。はい。
なるほど。日本に来たら必ず買うものとかありますか？
買うもの、まあコンビニの
はい。
飲むこんにゃくゼリーみたいな。
ああ、美味しい。確かに。
はいはい
何味
はい。
ですか？
ああ、何味でもいいんですけど、桃とかがいいです。
ああ、こういう
それです。はい
チューブで
はい
飲めるやつ。確かに
はい
あれ、
はい。
アメリカないんですか？
ないんですよ。はい、意外にも。
あれは確かに美味しいですね。なんかコンビニで他に買うものとかありますか？
いやもうおにぎりとか、そうで
あ
すね。納豆巻きとか。
あ、あ
うん
あ、美味しいですね。
はい
確かに確かに
納豆派なんですね。
納豆派です。はい。
確
日本人で分かれる。
ああ、そうですよね。はい。
かに。iPhone の
うん
スクリーンタイムってどんな感じですか？全然こういうアプリよく使ってるとかでもいいですし、
ああ、そうで
なんか
すね。
どん
まあよくなんかそういうなんか使いすぎだよみたいな
はい
数値はあるんですけど、
はい
はい。まあ主にそうですね。まあ、最近はチャット GPT とかよく使ってますね。
あ
はいはい。例えばレストラン行って
はい
こういうワインのメニューがあってなんか
はい
おすすめはとか
はい
そういうのを聞いたり、
へ
まあ、あと
え
はメールとかエッセイとか書いてる時に
はい
これをもう少し簡単な言い方にしてくれないかとか、
う
あるいは
ん
よく記事のなんていうんですかね、記事というかタイトル
はい
をもう少しなんか工夫したいなって思う時になん
あ
か10種類ちょっと考えてくださいみたいな。
確かに確か
はいはいはい。
に新しいアイディアが
そうですね。
もらえますよね。確かに好きな Figma の新機能 Figma サイズ Figma メイク
はい。はい。
Figma ドロー Figma バズの中で何が一番好きですか？
そうですね。まあ個人的にはもちろんFigma メイクはなんですか、自分だけでは考えなかった自分自身では作れなかったものを作れるっていう意味ではすごいまあ使い勝手というかがいいなとは思いますし、あと個人的にはなんかFigma ドローの機能をよく使ってます。
なるほど。
はい。
どんな時に使ってますか？ユースケー
やっぱ
ス。
そういう例えば、友達の誕生日のカードとか、は
ああ、
い、
いいですね。
のためのイラストとかを
なるほど
使ってます。
なるほど。
はい。
なんかこの機能もっと評価されてもいいのにとかってありますか？全体の中で。
Figma サイトっていうのはやっぱデザインをコードにHTML、CSS になんか自動的に変えるっていうような機能はあるんですけど、
はい
デザインをコードに変えるときにやっぱ結果がデザインと全く違うっていうのはよくあるんですけど、それをいかになんですかね、 how to say it's like
差をなくす。
差をなくすかっていうのを頑張ってたんで、それをなんかもう少しまあアピールできたらいいなと思いますね。
Figmaコンフィグin 東京はありますか？
そうですね。毎年なんかインターナショナルでやってるんですけど、で去年はシンガポール、今年はロンドンといった意味では、候補の一つではあります。はい、
楽しみです。あとは休みがあったら何したいですか？
休みですと、日本でしたら巨人戦見に行く。今回も行きます。
いいですね。
子供の時から見てた。
そうですね。もう中学校あたりか小学校あたりから、テレビ中継見てました。
選手の曲とか歌も。
結構知ってます。当時の清原のトンボみたいな感じ。
逆になんか他に日本で好きなものってありますか？音楽とかでもいいですし、漫画とか。
そうですね。なんか日本のデザインセンスというか、例えばよく、インテリアデザインとかもすごいインスピレーションになってます。なるほど。
ディランさんのみんなが知らない秘密ってありますか？自分ゆきさんだけが知ってる
秘密。そうですね。常にオンラインで、よくツイッターの誰もライクとかもないツイートを探し出してきて、こういうようななんか Figma のフィードバックがあるよみたいなことを、発見してくれて、でみんなに、なんかシェアしてるっていうのがよくあります。なんか、
結構ユーザーの声をずっと見てるんですね。
そうですね。
じゃあ最後に10年前の自分にアドバイスするなら何て言いますか
？10年前の自分にアドバイス。そうですね。よく10年前の自分は何ていうんですか、自分にあまり自信がなかったというか、他の何ていうんですかね、例えばミーティング内でもう少し偉い人たちの偉い人たちの方はもっとなんかよくこのっていうんですかね、その経緯を重要視しすぎて、で今回もリーダーとしてもわからないこと多いじゃないですか。でね、それを何ですか、リーダーでも人間なんだよっていうのをそれをなんか認識してれば、自分が思いついたことをもう少しなんとか自信持って、
伝
伝えるというか、伝えられたらよかったのかなと。
ありがとうございます。じゃあ最後にFigma の日本のユーザーの方に一言あればお願いします。
現代こそ今こそなんかデザインっていうのはなんかよくなんですか AI でデザインはどうなっていくのかっていう質問あると思うんですけど、今の時代だからこそデザインが重要なのだっていうのをみんなに分かってもらいたいのが、まず一つですね。っていうのはAI によって誰でもその製品を作ることはできるんですけど、そういった世界の中でじゃあいかになんていうんですかスタンダードするかディフェレンシエイトするかっていうのを考えると、やっぱデザインその体験のみがディフェレンシエイトする手段なんで、なのでデザイナーとしてのスキル、人間を中心にするなんですか考え方は非常に大事だと思うんで、そういった意味ではみんなデザイナーの仕事っていうのは非常に大事なんで、それを、理解していただいて頑張ってもらいたいっていう。
ありがとうございます。大丈夫です。いや大丈夫です。